The funny thing is, when somebody gets zeroed during an event, most people immediately look at their power. How strong he was, how much did he spend, where where his heroes was bad or good, was his account weak. But after watching another Primal conflict, I start noticing something. A lot of players getting punished were actually the weakest players. Some of them had strong accounts. Some of them had good heroes. Some of them had plenty of power. And yet they were still getting forced teleported, sieged, and chased around the map. So I start asking myself a question. If power wasn't the problem, what was? Because let's be honest, most players think protection comes from strange. The bigger your account gets, the safer you're feeling. You unlock strongest heroes, you get strongest troops, you improve your technology, your power keeps going up. And without realizing it, you start believing something. You start believing your account is protecting you. But during those events, I think reality is very different because the player survival aren't always because the player surviving aren't always the strongest. They're often the hardest to punish, and those are two completely different things. That's when I notice something else. When players getting into trouble usually make some mistakes before anything bad happen. They expose themselves not intentionally, not because they were bad players, but because they stopped paying attention to where they were. And once that happened, the rest happened very quickly. One rally, one forced teleport, a few enemy paying attention, and suddenly the situation looked completely different. Now you're not playing the event anymore. You are trying to save your city. And honestly, I think this catches players because the punishment feels delayed. You can sit in a dangerous position for 10 minutes. Nothing happened. 20 minutes. Nothing happened. Maybe 30 minutes. Still nothing. And your brain starts saying, see, it's fine. But that's the trap because dangerous positioning rarely punish you immediately. It punish you when somebody finally notice you. And those are very different things. I learned this lesson years ago. I mean, Age of Empire Mobile is not the first kingdom building game I'm playing. Back when I started playing those kingdom building games, I used to think dangerous was obvious. I thought if I was in danger, I do know. Turns out that's not how it works. Most of the time, danger is invisible. Nothing is happening. Nobody's attacking you. Everyone looks fine. Then suddenly your screen is full of marches. Now you're making decisions under pressure, usually bad decisions. Then I start wondering something. Why do some players almost never get catched? Because we've been all seeing them. They play every event, they're active, they're involved, yet somehow they're never the city getting focused. They're never the players getting force teleported. They're never the easy target. And I don't think that's a luck. I think they're constantly managing visibility. They are thinking about positioning before they think about fighting, which is probably the opposite of what most players do. Most players ask, who should I attack? The safer player asks, who can attack me? And honestly, that's one question changing everything. Because once you start thinking that way, you start noticing things. You notice how exposed your city is. You notice nearly enemies. You notice possible rally paths. You notice where trebuchet could be come from. You notice where you would attack if you were the enemy, and suddenly your decision change. Then things get even more interesting because positioning doesn't just protect your city, it protects your account progression. And I think that's where many players underestimate the problem. When somebody gets forced teleported, they usually wang it off. When somebody gets zeroed, people joke about it. but that there is a real cost hiding behind those moments. Lost resources, lost healing speed-ups, lost event participation, lost opportunities. And sometimes the worst part isn't what you lose, it's what you could have giant instead. That's where I think the community gets tricked. We see the final moment, the city burning, the forced teleport, the rally, the siege. But the mistakes happen much earlier. The mistake happen when the player decide where to sit. The mistake happen when the player stop at paying attention. The mistake happen when they assume nobody's watching. By the time the trebuchet arrive, the real mistake is already over. The punishment is just catching up. And that completely changed how I look at this event, because now when I see somebody get zeroed, the first thing I ask isn't how strong was his account. The first thing I ask is how did they become a target, because strength doesn't decide whether enemy notice you. Position does, visibility does, awareness does. And sometimes the strongest account on the battlefield is one bad positioning away from becoming 3 points. That's probably the biggest realization I have watching those events. Power make you stronger, positioning make you safer. And a lot of players spent years improving the first one, were barely thinking about the second one. Which is why some players keep getting punished even as their account gets stronger. They're fixing the wrong problem. They're trying to become harder to kill when they should be becoming harder to catch. And honestly, I think most players notice that lesson once, force teleport too late. Let me know if you ever had a moment where you thought you were completely safe and then suddenly found yourself getting rallied, sieged, or force teleported. Because I have. And looking back, the attack wasn't really the mistake, the positioning was.